Good evening and welcome to this working session of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. This meeting is being audio recorded, so please make sure you speak loudly and clearly for the microphone so that it can pick you up. We'll go around and we'll do introductions so that everybody in attendance will be recorded. And we also will have people from the tech department monitoring our microphones just because we've had some issues with those in the past. So my name's Kim Baker, I'm the chair.
David Anderson, Vice Chair.
Brenda Albrecht, Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Phil Holmgren, Executive Director of Business Services.
Judy Kelleher, Board of Education.
Stephanie Cass, Communications Department.
Bree Shinley, Board of Education.
Terry Lynn, Board of Education.
Carly Anderson, Board of Education.
Tracy Broval, Director of Technology and Data Services.
Emily McDonald, Assistant Superintendent.
And then we also have Superintendent Dr. Doug Van Zyl remoted in too, just so everyone's aware of that. We'll go ahead and start our meeting with policy updates. Brenda, do you have someone for us?
I do. We have a number of policies this evening. We'll start with policy 412, which is our expense reimbursement policy. There are very minor updates to this policy. Under section 3, item B, there is a difference in the MSBA recommended model. Right now we have that the mileage rate is set by the school board, and MSBA is recommending the IRS rates. On the second page of the same policy in, let's see, section 4, item D, there is language specific to Lakeville area schools regarding the purchase of airline tickets, that those tickets will be processed through the Business Services Office. And in section 5, there is specific language in this policy regarding the executive director being the administrator that will develop a schedule of reimbursement rates, as well as directives and guidelines to address methods and times for submissions of requests for reimbursement. And that is it for that policy.
Okay.
Should I move on to the next one?
Keep going,
All
yeah.
right. Policy 430 is a nepotism policy. There is no MSBA model policy regarding this one. This is specific to Lakeville area schools, so there are no changes or red lines to this policy. The next policy is policy 432, which is the teacher code of ethics. Again, there is no MSBA policy on this. This is specific to Lakeville area schools, and it follows the statute of teacher code of ethics. The next policy is policy 435, access to employee mailboxes and school district internal mail systems. Again, there is no MSBA policy. This is specific to Lakeville area schools and reflects an arbitration award that the district won back in 2004. So no changes to that policy. The next policy is policy 526, which is hazing prohibition. There are some minor changes to this policy. On item number 4, reporting procedures. Typically, a policy like this would be having reports of hazing be made to the district human rights officer. This policy has specific language that it is made to the executive director of special education and student services and the executive director of administrative services. That is what our policy says currently. The MSBA policy typically just has the school district human rights officer. So this could go either way, whichever the board decides. Item C, there is some red line there. There's no change in language. This is specifically just a reorder of the language. There's no language change there. And then the same thing for item number 6. No change to language, just a reorder of the language in that policy. Any questions on that one?
Nope.
Okay, and then the last policy is policy 704, which is the development and maintenance of an inventory of fixed assets and a fixed asset accounting system. This is a MSBA recommended policy. We do not currently have this policy in place, and it was recommended by our auditors to have this policy in place. All right, and that's it. That was the last one.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on any of those?
Thank you so much for all the work on those.
Yeah,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yep, thank you.
Takes a lot of work to get all those updated.
It does.
Thank you. So then our next one is supposed to be from the Board of Education Policy Committee. Brian's not here at the moment. Director Kelleher, would you be able to give us an update on that?
Do you have those printed out?
I don't.
Do you have them? You don't have them either printed out? I don't have them printed out to know which ones they were. Can you
It
just tell
says,
me-
it says 101.
I know
But
the
she doesn't know what
numbers,
they
but
are.
what, give me the titles for those numbers, please. Do you have the titles, anybody?
Do you want to just skip it and come back to it?
Yeah, I'll get them up.
Oh, you can.
Because I was gonna say, I know what we changed, oh, yes, thank you. So 101 is the naming of the school district.
Yes.
101.1 was, I think, the legal name of the district. And then we have 201, which is legal status of the School Board of Education. And I know we went through those pretty detailed compared to the MSBA and did not see any changes. And any changes that we made just clarified it and more aligned it to our terminology and the words we used. I don't believe, in my perspective, that there was any changes to change the concept of what each of the policies already stated. It was just to make them a little more clarifying for how we operate here locally is what those were about. So I believe when they come out, you can read them. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Bree, myself, or Brian, but they weren't anything that changed the substance of the policy.
Okay. Or did you have anything to add to that?
Nope, that's correct. 101.1 wasn't it was a sub of 101. Yeah, so, yeah.
Yep.
There wasn't really any
that
big changes.
That MSBA has that we didn't
Yes.
have.
So we wanted to make sure we added it onto our policies.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the reason we're bringing it here, because then I think once it's presented here, then you take it through legal to make sure that it's all legally good before it comes back to us to vote and, do first reading and vote.
Of course. So then, when we think about these for our meeting next week, the policies that Brenda presented to us will be the ones that we vote on to approve, and then these will have to go through her first before we do that, correct?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Any other questions on policies? No? All right, and for attendance purposes, Carol wasn't at the table when we did introductions, so I'll allow her to introduce herself real quick.
Sure. I'm Carol Potter, Director of Special Services.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll go on to our discussion topics for tonight. We have an implementation update presented by Dr. McDonald.
All right. Hopefully it will connect. Oh, it's thinking. Oh, well. All right.
Well, while that's loading, I will go ahead and get started, so thanks so much for the opportunity to provide you with an update. There's been a significant amount of work that has happened and continues to happen related to our boundary adjustments since the board approved those boundaries a number of weeks ago. So our intent here tonight is to give you a high-level overview from each department. As you know, each department has their own expertise in this process and is contributing to making sure that we are ready to go and that our students and families and staff are ready to go. So I'll just kick it off by just doing a quick reminder, as you all know, that we have been in this attendance area adjustment process for quite some time. We had 3 phases. The first phase was really a planning phase, and that started officially in the fall, but certainly discussions prior to that as we were building Highview Elementary. The second phase of that was our design phase. That really started in late fall of 2023 and continued through February of 2024. We put together a design team, both a design team and an input team. And then the third phase was really sort of to finalize and to work through the implementation phase, which it started in February and will actually go into the spring, but this is like an update on the progress to date. As you also know, we, through our input team and our design team, we had quite a number of people that provided feedback along the way, internal and external stakeholders. We provided 2 opportunities for our families and community to weigh in on the various designs. And then the third opportunity was to select a preferred design. So we had a lot of feedback throughout those processes. And then immediately after, once the board approved the boundaries, then the administration began to take on the take on the implementation process, which is where we are now. Our K-8 principals, we have been meeting with them and talking with them, and they really are doing a phenomenal job of preparing to welcome our students and families. They're in the process of planning events in the spring, both at the elementary and middle school. As you know, our high school boundaries aren't changing at this time. They are thinking through what will be best for students transitioning into those buildings and how they can make sure that they feel welcome. So in addition to spring events, they're also talking about events, summer events, and what that looks like leading into the fall.
I'm just gonna give you
yes,
one
please.
break real quick. So just for attendance purposes, Brian Thompson walked in, so we have him recorded as being here. Thank you.
Hey, I'm here.
Thank you.
In terms of Highview, as you know, we did onboard our new principal, Brett, and he has been very busy interviewing and making selections for staff for his building. So that is pretty far down the track. Expect to be released with the rest of the staffing shortly. He is also has planned to welcome events here at the district office. We don't have the certificate of occupancy yet for the building, but he wanted to get in front of that and have an opportunity for families to come in. I think his first one's Thursday. So really starting to build those relationships with families, which is really, really exciting. Bill can confirm, but I believe we're still shooting for April 15th for the certificate of occupancy, so then we'll be able to plan some building events and tours and those types of things, so that's great. In terms of Kid Zone, just a quick update. Because the registration for Kid Zone had already started, all of the students that have registered have been transitioned over to their new location, and anything in addition to that is currently just on pause as we're sorting out the final logistics related to movement across the system. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy and Steph, and they're going to talk specific about some things in their area that they've been working on.
Thank you. In partnership with TeamWorks and our student enrollment team, we worked hard following the approval of the attendance boundaries. We started off by reviewing the attendance lines. When you are working in a mapping system, sometimes those lines are really thick, sometimes they run through the middle of a house. And so we had to clean up all of those lines to make sure that we had clear attendance boundary lines. We made sure that our students were geocoded correctly, and geocoding means that we're taking a physical address and putting it into giving it coordinates for a mapping system. We made sure that our students were assigned to the correct school site within Infinite Campus, and then we verified that that handy attendance search tool that we have online where people can type in their address, we verified that that was working properly. We also partnered with the comms team on many pieces to this. We sent out a communication to our K through 8 families to confirm their site assignments. We worked with the comms team to update the attendance area adjustment webpage and the enrollment web pages. We also responded to families who reached out with questions and were in need of support. We had a parent guide that our communications team put together to help our families navigate attendance area changes. We had a designated phone number that people could call, and we had an email address that people could email as well.
Yeah, and I would just like to say, in total, we've had approximately 25 families reach out to us over these past few weeks, and those calls have been really managed by Robin Kalla and Grace Olson, who have been working really hard to listen to concerns and respond accordingly. They verified the school assignment in those cases, provided the options that are available and posted on our website, and assured these families that our school administrators and our wonderful school staff are ready to support our families and their students in the transition that's to come. So we feel very confident in the plan to this point, and have had really good conversations with those families in this case.
So we'll pass it over to Bill. He'll talk a little bit about transportation, where we are with that. Oh.
Can I ask a question about the previous topic before we jump to transportation? Hey, so I've received a couple emails around students being able to go to different schools. I don't know if this is an appropriate topic to discuss now or not. So I'm just curious, with things starting to normalize, do we have updated metrics that show the capacity levels of each school and then by the grade? Because a couple emails that I've seen was around 5th grade parents and 8th grade parents, if they have the means or if they may be able to transport their children into the school that they were currently at. What's the rules around? Because I'm hearing, like, are we not allowing that to happen? So I just want to make sure I understand where things are at.
If it's okay, Brian, that's part of the presentation.
Okay.
So if you're okay just holding that question, just so you have all the information,
All right.
and then we'll come back to it.
Great, thank you.
Okay. We met last week, the safety committee, looking at our safety zones, walker zones, to do any updates that we need to do. Mainly, we really looked at the new building and where those walking zones and safety zones would be. Not a lot of big changes in the other buildings, so that was good. Anyway, we'll finish that up very soon. What I can tell you is the start times in all of our current buildings will remain the same. At first, we were looking at some busing issues that might make us move some of that, but no, all buildings will be at start at the same time. Highland Elementary will be assigned a late start with the buses available. And then at this point in time, we don't have to add any buses, because some of the extra buses we're using to move kids from one side of the district to the other, now we can use for our increased enrollment. So we're looking at not having to increase any busing for next year, so that's going to help our budget. And then, of course, families will receive transportation updates in the portal 1 week before school, just like we always do, so you'll know exactly when your bus comes and what time you'll be picked up. That's all I have.
All right.
Do you,
Sorry, I'm sorry.
no, sorry. Do you have any initial projections right now from Schmitty and Sons on what the budget might be for next year for them in regards to, like, hey, this boundary change allowed us to stop going over to different boundaries?
Yeah.
I know, like, directionally, we feel like there's gonna be cost savings. Have you had initial, like, hard savings, like, hey, this is how much it's gonna be, or estimates?
What we're looking at is using the same number of buses we have this year. So yes, that's a savings, because we won't have any
Because we're not
increased
spending
busing.
more. Because we
Well, we use-
projected more because we
Yeah.
thought we'd do additional routes because of the
When we
new
look at,
school.
150, 200 new students, we need more busing. So every year, we need more busing, right? So this next year, we're looking right now that we will not have to increase any buses, the number of buses.
The number of buses.
Yeah,
So-
they'll remain the same. So it'll just be the percentage change in the contract that we have on
So
with
it's
them.
staying flat while we're adding additional student headcount.
Correct.
Okay,
There's no savings in terms of like
yeah.
gas or not having to go as far, those kinds of things.
Because you're not driving all the way across from one border to another,
We pay a flat rate per day per bus.
so it doesn't matter how many kids we.
Doesn't matter how much fuel we burn or how many kids are on the buses.
So then how are we actually saving money? Because if the kids are gonna be at the same neighborhood stop to pick up kids.
We're not going to be adding any buses. One new bus costs about $75,000 a year.
Yeah.
So most time we're adding a couple buses a year. So that increase is not there for next year. at this point in time.
So can I maybe ask this question in a different way? So in the preliminary budget that we have for next year, was there a number that you were projecting that?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So-
Yes, we did predict 2 new buses in the new year.
2 new routes?
Yeah.
So we're saving those 2 routes, and do you happen to know off the top of your head what that savings is,
Yeah.
or what?
It's
the
about
route-
150,000. A new
Oh,
bus, they
per
use one
route.
bus per year, okay, is
Yeah.
Is that what you're
$75,000.
asking?
Yeah, so save one, okay.
Okay, now those buses that we do add, lots of times are running more than one route. We're a
Right.
4-tier system, so some of these buses are running 2 tiers, 3 or 4.
Yeah,
Of course, we don't know exactly where that'll fit yet.
but each route is usually 150,000, or each bus?
Each bus
Each
is,
bus.
each bus is 75.
So it's roughly, because we're staying flat, it's about a $300,000 that we're not
Yeah.
spending?
Each bus is about 75.
Oh,
So
got
it's
it, 150 overall, so that's,
Not significant savings, I guess. is what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
it's still a savings.
Yeah.
it's savings.
But how much do we spend in transportation? Like, we're looking at $7-8 million that we spend in transportation.
Yes,
right?
I
So
think we're pushing.
$150,000 savings is not a lot.
Yeah,
compared
we're
to the
pushing
$8
$9
million
million.
that we're spending.
But it's
Yeah.
some dollars that we can put somewhere else in the preliminary budget.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay. Thank you.
All right, staffing process. Currently, we are on track to release our staffing this Friday. Any shifts in sections or classes would have an impact to staffing going forward. Contractual language for Highview Elementary staffing process has been met and completed, so we've posted, interviewed, offered, and have made placements for those positions. Secondary notifications of non-renewal based on registration numbers have happened, and elementary and special ed completion of non-renewal notifications is happening this week. And the staffing timeline requirements, as long as we are on track this Friday, have been met.
Back to me here. I'd like to start off this slide by making sure we're on we're using the same vocabulary. Sometimes people interchange intra-district and open enrollment. And so intra-district are students who are our current residents who are attending a school outside of their neighborhood assigned school. And open enrollment are students who are not residents of our district who are coming to us from a different district. So regarding intra-district and open enrollment, we had a team that came together to discuss implementation of the new attendance boundaries. We wanted to make sure that it was a multidisciplinary team so that we can get feedback from all different departments within our district. We had staff from enrollment, HR, student services, and special ed, teaching and learning, communications, our design team, and we reached out to administrators when we needed to. We met over the course of 3 months, January through March, to review scenarios and to make recommendations for open enrollment, intra-district enrollment, school placement for programs such as Ignite and Impact Academy. We wanted to make sure that we best supported the implementation of the new boundary changes. And as you can imagine, we had a lot of conversation over the open enrollment in intra-district and making sure that we were following policy and statutes and we could make the best possible recommendations. Those implementation recommendations were approved by our administration per our school board policy and have been communicated out to families. Our current intra-district and special programs have all been placed at their current buildings based on our district policy and procedures. Per our procedure, any new families who might qualify will be notified by April 15th. Open enrollment remains open per state statute and as required by law. Our students who are placed or denied based on capacity for open enrollment at the requested school site will also be notified by April 15th. As far as our, any special services placements, in the instance where a student's needs can't be met at their neighborhood school, they're placed in a program designed by the district. And I'm going to hand it over to Carol Potter to share any additional information with you.
Sure. So special education staffing is quite complex, and Mr. Haveman and I started with our principals. And so we met with each principal individually, and we talked about the following things. So we talked about the total number of students with disabilities that would now be at their resident home school, because that obviously has changed. We talked about the needs of students, including their space and environmental needs. Every student, one student is not one student when it comes to special education, and so there are different needs for space and the environment. There are different equipment needs. Some students come with a lot of equipment, and some students do not. And then there's also the need for accessible restrooms. So some students require perhaps a changing table of some sort or wheelchair access, some different kinds of needs. And not all of our buildings have those. And so we had to make determinations about where those center-based programs would be located. We also then looked at the teaching and related services staff, because that comes on top of all those pieces. After we look at the student needs, we talk about where are special education teachers going to be placed, what is their licensure areas, how many paraprofessionals do we need to support those classrooms, how many nurses, if a student needs a one-on-one nurse, if a student needs a related services nurse or a building nurse, what does that look like for the size of the building? And then the same would go for occupational therapists. Where are students landing? Where do we serve them? Speech therapists, and also our DAPE FTE. Depending on the number of students at each site, that DAPE FTE would then change as well. And so just a little bit about the student placement that Tracy was talking about. So a student placement, as far as special education goes, is when the district makes a decision about where that student is best served. And so if we have a center-based program at a site that's made up of 8 to 10 students, let's say, that student will then be placed there. So they would no longer necessarily be in their home school. There's a possibility that they might join a program at a different school site. And then, as I alluded to, because of the complexities of the special education staffing, the leadership team and our internal team, we have been doing a lot of layers and have spent many hours, and we're still at the tail end of figuring out all of those pieces as we go, but soon to be there.
So do we have any idea when the families will be notified of their placement?
As soon as we have all of these pieces figured out. So staffing will go out, Brenda, on Friday, correct? And so we should have all of our special education pieces completed as well. And then as soon as Dave gives us the green light to go ahead and notify, we'll notify families.
So that's a big improvement, because in the past, it's sometimes been August.
Glad to know that.
Thank you.
All right, so that's our overview of what's been happening, so we're happy to open it up if anyone has questions.
Are we gonna get to my topic, or
Yeah.
did we talk about that already?
Go ahead, ask your
All
question.
right, so if we go back to the previous slide, I guess my question is just to make sure I understand. While special education updates, so thank you for that, because it's about 20% of our student population is in that category, but 80% of our population is just curious, we are allowing intra-district, so if they want to go to another school, that we are allowing that, or are we not allowing that?
So we, as a general rule, we closed intra-district transfers for this year and next year so that we could move, so the students would be able to move to their buildings. And we would be able to sort of address the capacity concerns as well as some other concerns that we had during the boundary process. So there are some very specific cases in which that would be permitted. Special education would be one of them. Specialized programmings would be another. So obviously, if we have open enroll students into Ignite or into Impact, we permit that in intra-district to happen, yeah.
So the answer is no, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, not as a general rule, we do not have it.
But did we do it last year?
No.
I
Did
thought
we have it?
we allowed open enrollment last year.
Are we talking about?
Intra-district.
I'm sorry.
What school year are you talking
In this
about?
intra-district where if I'm zoned to go to Orchard Lake in this new boundary design, and if I want to send my kid to, let's say, like Eastview or else, is that allowable?
Last year, we did do that, yeah,
Okay,
based on capacity.
okay.
Yeah.
And this year?
This year and next year, we closed that,
Okay.
with the exception of specialized circumstances like programs.
And just to clarify, the reason it's closed is because,
Is because we are at the front end of trying to redo all of our boundaries. And if you open up intra, for example, we'd have I would guess, quite a number of students that would want to just go right back to the building that they're being moved from. And so in order to be able to get a handle on all of the logistics around what we need to do from a system standpoint, that was the recommendation that was then supported moving forward is to just close that for 2 years.
And can I just add that that's not an unusual practice. We did that in the 1990s when we did a lot of boundary adjustments and stuff. And I know even when we opened the high school, we froze open intra-district enrollment for 3 years. So it's not unusual to do that during the boundary adjustments to give integrity to the programs and the systems and just the overall process.
what's in the best interest for the students? I mean, if they gotta go to a new school at 5th grade and they gotta go to the new school to 8th grade, I'm just thinking as this is a boundary change, it is one of those mulligans or one-off deals where we may allow it. But I guess I'm trying to better understand if we've done this calibration where the schools are not at 85 or 80% of capacity, why are we not allowing kids, if they have the means to get there, to finish out the term within the respective school that they were at for 5th grade and 8th grade? It's 1 year, and then they go to the new middle school, wherever they choose to go, as long as it doesn't impact the capacity of that building. Now, I know there's other logistics to consider, which I don't know. I'm just asking the question, like, why can't I send a 5th grader back to his school if they want to go there, and if there's capacity at that building in the 5th grade level? Like,
So like grandfathering in the fifth.
yeah, grandfather them in. Like, what's wrong with
Do
that?
we have numbers on that?
Can I just make, I'm sorry, can I just make, I want to be careful about saying like when kids have the means or families have the means to do
Let me
that.
rephrase that, yeah. The
No,
busing's not available.
I feel
Yeah.
like if we were to make that kind of decision, we need to make it available for all students. So we need to either bus students who don't have the means to get there if they want to do that, or, I know but I just want to highlight that it shouldn't be those who can get rides
Yep.
and those who can't.
But last year when we did intra-district, we didn't bus kids to different schools. If they wanted to open and row or go through intra-district to that school, they could.
No, we don't provide transportation for intra,
Across the board.
district transfers. yeah.
Okay.
I have a question regarding the current inter-district transfers. That, they continue to stay in that building, is that correct? I mean, the ones that have been, they were supposed to go to one building and they're going to
Yes.
another one. They're not kicked out, they stay, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So then when we do open enrollment, are we giving, like, if a kid from Apple Valley wants to go to Lakeville and they go to Eastview, but if a kid who was zoned to go to Eastview and wants to go back and finish up Eastview at 5th grade, we're not gonna allow that, but we're gonna allow an Apple Valley kid to come in and do 5th grade?
The open enrollment's different.
You have to allow
Yeah.
state statute.
It's a state statute, but, so we're giving open enrollment kids precedence, well, let me rephrase that.
No,
They're not a
the
precedent,
open
but-
enrollment, you don't have to, they don't get to pick their school, they can pick the district. We pick the school.
We pick the school.
Correct.
Does that sound right?
That is.
No.
What, that they pick the district
Well, let
and
me
we pick
rephrase
the
that.
school?
That kids can't, if parents want to move their kids, or not move, but if they want to transport their kids to a different school and there's capacity, like what's the level of effort if like 10 kids get added to a 5th grade classroom and I don't know the downstream impact. This doesn't seem, I don't know.
Well, so
Have
I
we ran the numbers
I
on this
think-
to look at the number of kids that would be impacted on this and how it would impact the capacity at our buildings? Because I mean, if we're doing it through intra-district transfer, I don't know that every student would want to do that. I mean, they
So-
would want to go to their new building, I don't know.
It's more than just, it impacts how we staff with teachers, how we staff with our specialists, and you look at all the components that they're looking at just from the special education services side. There's a lot of areas that are impacted by this. It's how the busing all works. And again, to Carly's point, with the intra-district open enrollment, they have to bus their kids, and so then it becomes an equity issue. And so like,
It's an equity issue
it's a-
already for those who do intra-district.
So, well, so yes and no, but this is a different situation of equity because we're now saying, if you're saying you want to grandfather those families in and all the families that can afford
I
to do it.
apologize. Let me repause. I don't think I want to grandfather those children in. What I'm saying is that let's open
Okay.
up intra-district. Why are we closing that down?
And let them have the choice.
Let them have the choice. If they want to go, they want to go.
Let them have the choice to do it.
It's
So-
still the equity issue, the
then-
kids that can't.
But we still do that right now.
We do it right now.
Because they choose to do
That's
it,
true.
they have to,
But
they don't
that
have
goes,
busing to do it, so they have to drive their children to school.
but that goes back to what they were just talking about and what Emily had mentioned is if you don't pause intra-district open enrollment, you typically will then have everybody probably wanting to stay in their old schools. And so then, in effect, we really haven't done boundary adjustments
Well, we
to
could put
come to
parameters around
the
it. I mean,
effects.
You could say that, right now, we allow intra-district transfer, we allow siblings. So for this instance, we wouldn't, it would just, you would have the choice if you want to stay in 5th and 8th grade, but siblings don't. You know, we could put some things on it, I'm just brainstorming, sorry, with the rest of you.
And we should unpack this more. I don't know. I'm not aligned with just saying no. But that's just one person, not a, or many, so.
Yeah, but we have to be careful with the messaging that we share with the community too, because we had a newsletter or was that a newsletter that came out this week that talked about the enrollment and boundary adjustment process and that it's paused now and.
I get that, but if there's
So-
capacity in the school and if it makes sense from a teacher staffing, whatever numbers wise, and there's probably a lot of downstream impacts that I don't know around, if you added 10 kids and maybe you need to add more lunch tables or X, Y, Z, but if the school's only at 80% capacity and it was previously at 90% capacity, I mean, to me, it's kind of like if a student wants to finish, if they can, for whatever reason that the parents and the student may want to have for 5th and 8th grade, I don't know, what does it hurt?
Well,
What
so
does it
let-
hurt? Do we lose money?
So let me play the other side of that, back to some of your conversations when we were talking about the actual boundary adjustment plan, is you were very focused on wanting to make sure that the plans we support are longer term, so we're not moving kids again.
Yep.
So doesn't this undo that thinking, making the plan shorter, and we'll be doing boundary adjustments sooner?
No, because the schools are not at 100% capacity.
But I think that's because,
And if we're looking at just 5th and 8th graders, that's not a long-term,
So now
they're
you're-
there for just 1 year, for the kids themselves.
okay, so now you're back to just 5th and 8th graders, not just open, intra-district open enrollment? Are you talking just for 5th and 8th?
Well, I think it'd be intra-district as a whole. I mean, if we had it last year, where if a parent in 1st grade wants to send their kids to Cherry View, and we gave them the flexibility to do so, I guess how is last year any different from this year? I mean,
I think the 5th and 8th graders should get priority.
Can I just,
I don't know, I'm confused.
one thing
Trying
that
to follow
I
and I'm
just
not
want to
following.
acknowledge, and I hear you saying too, is like we don't really understand all the reasoning behind it. And one thing I do want to respect is there's a whole team of people who like came together to make these decisions. I would just say as a board member, one thing that I've been struggling with since we made the decision is trying to provide an explanation to people about why we're not grandfathering or why, so I think I don't think we can pretend to
Yeah.
know all the reasons, and I don't think it's necessarily the case that we should.
Well,
But hold on, just let me finish. I just think it's important that we understand why.
So let's ask, what would be the top 3 reasons why the district decided we are not going to do intra-district transfers across the board?
Well, Tracy can jump in too. One of the things that when we looked initially at what that would look like from a grandfathering standpoint for our current 4th and 7th graders, I think there were a lot of questions that were raised, first of all, around equity, meaning we're creating a situation in which those parents that have means to transport their students are able to do that, are able to make different choices in our system. And so then the next question we asked was, well, if we transported all students, because we don't want to create an inequity in the system, what would that look like? So we costed it at, Bill, big number?
Yeah, it's $825,000.
$825,000 to bus students back to going into 5th and 8th grade. We are about to release staffing. We have been operating on the original plan, and as a result, staffing would be impacted because we don't know how many students are staying in each building. So that would definitely push that process back. We talked about that we would have more shifting than the following year, not just with staff, but also with students. So we're essentially sort of delaying a little bit some of that disruption. We had a lot of conversation about siblings because we said, okay, well, what if we grandfathered in those 5th and 8th graders and look at that? What if we did that? Because one of the things we didn't want to do is create situations where families were split between 2 schools. And so at the same level, right? Many families are split between multiple levels, right? And so we looked at what that would look like. So then the question came, well, if you have a current 7th grader and you grandfather that and you say, well, if you have a sibling that's in 6th grade, they can be grandfathered in too. Then what if you have a 6th grader that doesn't have a 7th grade sibling? So now we're letting 6th graders come in that happen to have a 7th grade sibling, but we're not letting other siblings come. So these are just a few of and then from a special ed standpoint, it would in some ways undo a lot of the work that special education have done to, number one, ensure that students get to stay at their new home school, right? That they, unless they're in a program, and then where we're placing those programs based on space and accessibility and needs of our students. And then it also impacts all our specialized staffing. So if you're talking about things like nursing and OT and those other things. So as we are shifting kids from back to buildings, and then we have to sort of undo that then the following year. So, and then the other thing that we talked about too, and I don't know, Tracy, jump in if you have anything, but the other thing we talked about is if maybe you have a 4th grader currently and a 3rd grader, and we grandfather in, so now we have people at 2 different schools, or we approve siblings, then that student's gonna go to 4th grade and then they're gonna wanna stay, right? So we have essentially undone, in a lot of ways, the boundary work that we had 25, 30 members on a design team, we had 45-ish members on our input team, plus all the feedback that we had been responding to along the way. So those are just the things that off the top of my head that I know that were talked about in that cross-functional team at the district office, is sort of like managing that and how do we minimize disruption and move forward in a way that makes sense. So,
Can I ask
So
one
you
question?
said that $825,000 would be transportation.
yes.
But if they inter-district enroll, we don't provide transportation. You'd say you would?
Well, the question came, we've created an inequity for families because some can transport and some can't. So we just sort of went down the questions, and as the questions came and then there are more questions, we just tried to unpack those as they came. So if we don't want to do because, I mean, you're right. I mean, there are benefits and there are sort of drawbacks to I shouldn't say drawbacks, just logistical, things that need to get taken care of, whether they're grandfathered in or not. And so at the end of the day, because of the level of complexity of all the pieces, the recommendation was that we just move forward, and close our intra.
And that 800 was like,
Well-
if we had no so let's say it was just 5th and 8th, and we didn't allow siblings, that wouldn't be 800, right? That would
Yeah,
be
that,
like,
that assumption is we would need at least one bus at each building. 'Cause we're driving down the same road, picking up kids, some are going to one
75,000
building, some are going to the other building.
okay.
So we have to have at least one route per building to take
So
care of
that's
that.
not, it doesn't matter if it, okay.
Yeah, that didn't include the siblings calculation, which would only really come into
No,
play
it
if
wouldn't
we had more than 40
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
and
It
we'd have
wouldn't
to bus
matter.
more than 40 kids, you have to send 2 buses, but.
So can you explain again, like, why would you then reactivate this 2 years from now? Because the equity issues will still be here 2 years from now with kids who can transport, with parents who can transport their kids wherever they, during the process. Because the intra-district is gonna, like, you're giving parents choices of where they want to go. So I guess I'm trying to better understand what the difference is between 2 years from now versus like
Well,
just opening it up.
Think about the situation that we're in right now.
Right.
Like, we're in a situation where anybody who's in a middle school or an elementary school who's gonna have to move is gonna wanna stay at their home school.
What is
So-
wrong with that? I guess,
Well,
I don't know. I'm just wondering from a kid's point of view.
There's nothing wrong with a kid wanting to stay where they are, but in terms of that versus intra-district 2 years from now, like, this is a huge, all across the district, we're making a change, and it becomes like kids who can do that versus kids who can't, versus intra-district might happen because, I want my kid to go to Orchard Lake because I like Impact Academy, or I want my kid to go to a certain school because I'm a teacher there, that kind of thing, as opposed to like, this whole group of friends is staying, whereas this child doesn't have transportation from their parent because their parents work in the morning and they can't get their kid to school,
Some of
it's
it's
not the same
daycare too.
situation.
Some of it's daycare, they want their child there because their daycare is there. And it's different for every family. It's not like a large number of people that do that would want to do that.
So in both cases, the intra-district open enrollment, you can argue, is not an equitable solution for our families. But in this case, this is the district making boundary adjustments. And by allowing intra-district open enrollment to undo a decision or to backtrack on a decision that this board has made, then only allows those that have the ability to to intra-district enroll have the option to do that, whereas the kids that can't. So that's where the inequity comes in, a little bit stronger and more relevant in this case. But again, I think when we're looking from a board perspective, our role is to be looking at what is best for the district and for our students. And that's as a whole, not for an individual person, family, or neighborhood. It's what's best for the district and what's best for our students. And so when we voted for the boundary adjustments, was it D3? That was what we believe to be best for our students. And along with that came the efforts to start all the implementation process, which was started immediately, which is quite a ways down the road, all the way from staffing to where our special education is now getting the information sooner than they've ever gotten it. It's really put all the pieces into place to keep going. And I think we need to continue down that route with the decisions that we make. And again, we aren't going to be making everybody happy through this process, but what we are doing is what's best for this district. And in the long run, just with what was shared here, with what our principals are going to be doing, to welcome and start sending the information and the details out to these families, already helping them with the transition. We need to keep down that positive path of helping them make these transitions to be as successfully as successful as possible, not just for the child, but for their education side of it and the academics, but for the parents. Parents are going to need to be able to connect with new families at their new schools. Those are their new schools as well as the students. And I think it's really important for us to stay down this path and continue down this avenue, because I think what we have in place from an implementation process to get parents and students engaged in the transition will be very successful. If we can keep it going down this track and not do an about face, start over, delay our staffing, and go back to some families and, well, now we're gonna change and have them start doing an about face. I think we need to stay true to the decision we made and stay down that track.
So I appreciate your comment and I appreciate your point of view. I'm not aligned with that point of view, so my point of view would be, I'd like to have I prefer if we could talk through this maybe another working session, or are there additional options that can be available? I hate to just cut it all together. Yeah, I mean, there may be various instances for folks that may want to do intra-district. I guess the question is how could you make this work?
So,
Yeah.
By our policy, the board has to vote on intra-district transfers by March 31st annually every year. And that's what
We
a
do it last
special
year?
session is for after this.
We're having a special session after this.
Oh. Did we vote on this last year?
I don't think we really changed it.
We voted on things related to open enrollment, capacity numbers.
Oh, yeah, through the policies, but not inter-district. Oh.
I think as we weren't making any
So wait,
Change. We didn't make any changes. So we can talk through it, so we
no,
can talk
sorry,
through it.
I'll stop. I'll answer. I'll research more, I'll do some more research.
Can I just add one thing? Because I just want to make sure that people are aware that if we do make a change, that impacts our staffing, which we likely cannot complete until we know the direction that we're moving. So that's piece number one. What I will say also is that when we did run our numbers, the staffing it's not as significant of an issue at the middle level because they have the teaming model, but it would significantly differentiate our class sizes between Kenwood and Century. Century would really be looking at much higher class sizes because they would have more students divided over those teams. Fewer at Kenwood, which is one of the things that we were trying to adjust as part of our boundary process, was to make sure that we had some consistency also across the district. So in particular, from a staffing standpoint, it would really be elementary, and that would be all of the special education and specialized services implications related to that. So just so you have all the information as you're having your discussion.
Okay, one last question. For those who are already in intra-district, do they get to continue that, or do they?
We actually do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we should.
Can I just clarify with Brenda, like when we talk about how this would impact staffing, what are we talking about?
So it's exactly what Dr. McDonald just said. There would be class size imbalances at a couple of our middle schools, and we would not be able to put staffing out this Friday. I can't tell you exactly when we would be able to. It would depend on the decisions that are made, but it would significantly delay the staffing process.
Any further questions on this?
It's kind of a mess.
Thank you. All right, we'll keep going. The next part would be our legislative update. In January, we had one on the agenda and we just hadn't received any information about this. So I pulled some information from AMSD, which is the Association of Metropolitan Districts, to just kind of give a broad overview of some of the things going on in the legislature right now. So I'm going to move on. I'm sorry here. One of the things that happened this last week was the SRO bill was signed into law. That was on the 14th. That clarifies what types of physical holds can be used, requires training on de-escalation and responding to mental health crises, And SROs cannot be used to discipline students for violating school policy. So those are some of the things that were updated for that. And just to also clarify, they're looking at an update to the free school lunch program that we just had this year. One of the things that we have noticed with the implementation of this program is that students that bring their lunch from home, they can't get, a lot of times they want the milk. And so then they don't have any money in their lunch account because they're used to free lunch. So then they'll get the free lunch and throw the food away just so they can have the free milk. So this update would allow them to just get milk and school districts to be reimbursed for students that are coming in for just free milk. So that's just something once you get the kinks worked out, like you find out some things, right? So that's one of them. So I have like a few that we're just going through, like the House files that are going through right now and the Senate files. One of the House files that I think is kind of interesting would require school districts to provide students private space to receive telehealth, mental health services during the day. That's something that we've kind of been navigating after COVID because people were accessing telehealth a lot more frequently. So that's in there. There's one to require, or for MDE to establish a system for paying student teachers. I think that's really great because as a student teacher, I didn't get paid, so that would be great if we could have that. But I'm sure there's, again, some things that they need to work out with that. And then the health standards is also something that they're looking at. Right now, those are locally determined standards, and they want to switch those to having the health standards be from the state. So that's another one. I'm just going to keep going. Stop me if you have questions or if you hear of other things.
Can I just add something about the SRO one?
Sure.
That one was signed into law, and that was our representative, Jeff Whitty, worked across the aisle, and it was a very collaborative effort by both sides to come to agreement on that. And in talking to our police officers and police, they are pleased with the results on that one. So
Oh, yeah, he works really hard.
very glad that we kept them in our schools and doing what they're doing, but it was a very collaborative effort on both sides of the aisle to get that updated.
Awesome, thank you, that's appreciated. Another one that we have right now is increasing the revenue for English learners, expanding programming, and creating a statewide parent and community advisory council for English learners. There's also one to require cardiac emergency response plans in schools and annual drills now that we have like the cardiac units in most of our buildings. There's one right now that would prohibit book banning by public libraries and school libraries, so just going through some of the ones. There's one right now that would establish requirements for Tier 1 and Tier 2 special education licensure, and that would modify the requirements for licensure via portfolio for Tier 3. So those are some good things that can help bring in maybe teachers from out of state or teachers that are just early in the program of going to school, just to get them a licensure so that they can be in the classroom and kind of help us fill some of those shortage areas. There's also increasing local optional revenue to $920 per pupil, just for inflation. I'm sure you're aware of that one, right? Yeah, the finance guy. That would also reimburse school districts for costs related to unemployment and family paid medical leave. So kind of updating some of those things from last year too. On the Senate side, they've got some more things going on too. They want to provide more flexibility for districts to accommodate student needs, learning styles, and professional opportunities. That's one that is a platform item for not only the Metropolitan School District, but for MSBA. There's several that are advocating for that one. There's one to expand the use of special ed teacher pipeline grants, provide additional resources to accommodate special ed paperwork and free up time for teachers. That one's been on there like every year, so I hope that we can get that one through one time, because we do have teachers that get kind of bogged down with paperwork. There's one right now that a lot of people are watching and working on. It's amending the READ Act. They're talking about providing additional professional development to support the implementation and provide some flexibility with the timelines for districts as they implement these. There's one that's a health one to modify current requirements for administration of medication and epinephrine. That would be more geared towards our nurses that are providing that medication every day for students during the day. There's a really interesting one if you have any students that are interested in journalism. My son told me about it. Would expand and clarify freedom of speech and press for student journalists. So that's kind of an interesting one. There's one right now for paraprofessionals, and I'm sure that we've heard a lot about this year. just making sure that paraprofessionals are consulted in the creating and planning of training, and that they get 16 hours of annual paid orientation, provide health insurance to an employee that works 4 hours a day. So that's one of the paraprofessional ones. There's more components to that one. It's pretty complex. So that one's Senate File 1318 if you want to look it up, because there's a lot to that one. There's also one right now to require notice to parents if a student is removed from a classroom. And there's also one to amend the North Star State Education Plan to remove the requirement of reporting an MCA score for students who opt out. I've got one more slide if you want me to keep going, because there's a lot going on
You
right
can
now.
work for the legislator.
I looked at a lot of different
So you know,
things.
we're not seeing any slides,
I know, I'm
Okay.
just reading to you, so that's fine. It's okay. I don't have a clicker, but it's all good. So there's 3 more that I have on here that I had just highlighted. One of them is establishing an Aspiring Teachers of Color Pilot Scholarship Program. One would appropriate more than $1 million for intermediate school districts to establish a special ed apprenticeship program. So that would be like our District 917, that's an intermediate district. And then the final one, that there's a lot of components to this bill that I'm sure Bill understands a lot more than me, would authorize energy efficiency projects to qualify to long-term facility maintenance revenues, including heating improvements. So, have you seen that one yet?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah. So anyway, those are just a few. There's a lot of things going on next week as far as like some going to committee hearings, and you can actually attend those hearings and advocate for something that you're interested in.
I don't know, the legislator also is continuing to move one through. The cities are watching it very closely.
Yep.
Because legislation would remove the ability for cities to set their own local ordinances and zoning related to housing. And so that was brought up on the monthly chamber call, Access in Government. And just wondering how that would impact schools as we're planning for growth. And they don't really have the answers, and they're trying to get that, but just to be aware, that's not a school district one, but it could impact us when it comes to planning, how we plan, if that zoning, and so just want to make you aware of that too, because that one is moving forward more.
Thank you. Anything else? Questions? Okay. All right, so the next item we have on the agenda is an update from the Public Engagement Committee, and I'm going to pass it over to Carly.
All right. We had a meeting this week, Terry and Kim and I, and we talked about some upcoming things. So thanks to everybody who came to the Home Expo on Saturday. There were multiple board members there, and we were participating with the community education booth, and that was a lot of fun. We got to talk with different people, and so that was one of the engagement sessions we did. Coming up in April, we are meeting on April 9th with our Indian community in Avonlea, and so anybody is welcome to that. Board members, we are hoping we're trying to use these public engagement sessions as kind of the supplement of the time so we took out a board meeting time in order to try to do a public engagement. So these are in place of some of our board development sessions. And so that is happening in April. In May, we are meeting at the Heritage Center. That's
May 14th, does that make sense?
May 14th in the morning.
It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday at
9:30.
9:30 at the Heritage Center. So our goal there is to try to meet with older adults in our community, try to explain kind of just recent things that are happening in our school, how our schools are growing, where their tax dollars are going, and those kinds of things. And
Is
then,
that just your committee?
No.
nope,
Or anybody?
all board members.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a
that was
Tuesday
sent out to the
morning.
board.
So unfortunately, the Heritage Center doesn't do any sort of
They aren't open on
evening
the
and-
weekends, so.
Yeah. And then in June, we are meeting with our Somali community, so we're gonna do that. I think we haven't determined a location at this time, but I think that is mid-June
Do
as
we have
well.
a date? I don't see that we have a date yet.
June,
We do have a date, like
Oh, we
it's in our
do?
notes.
I don't think we have a date.
Oh, well, we don't have a date.
I think,
The board
Yeah,
doesn't.
so-
sorry, we do. I
We
think
do
it's
have a
June
date, And we
4th.
were looking at the Avonlea Community Center. I thought it was the 15th, but I could be wrong.
It's the Tuesday night, mid-June, so the week after graduation, that Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be the 11th if it's a Tuesday.
That makes sense. Right.
I'll double check that and let the board know. So that was confirmed with a resident of the Somali community, and I believe she's also serving as a liaison, so that was kind of what we have planned so far. And then I think in July, we have a lot of the PanProg events, and we also talked about going to this summer, some of the things in the Elko New Market area as well.
That's the end of June, I think.
Yeah. So lots of exciting things coming up.
And this Saturday, we were at the home show with the community ed, and I found that to be a very positive event. I talked to a lot of different people, I met a lot of different people. We had, trying to think who all attended, so I was there at one time, Terry, Carly, Dave, and Judy. Yeah, so off and on, we had quite a few people there, lots of good representation and lots of good discussion too. And Terry found a tree stump guy to take care of his trees.
I found a tree. Yeah, I did. I actually hired the guy too. He's coming over. Get my stumps out. I have a question.
Sure.
Did you get input on the form that was sent out to the board? Are we going to
that's
follow?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
Oh,
follow
I
that.
haven't looked at that yet, I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah.
all right. So I did send out kind of like a rough draft of a form for board members. This would be anytime you attend an event within the community, the school district, chamber event.
Yes.
Any of those that you fill it out. It's really just more for us as we collect data over how we're engaging with our community as a board, as it's one of our goals. We're looking at like how many events we're attending, just to kind of gain baseline data. This will help us so that Kim won't have to track all of that information. It'll automatically populate into an Excel spreadsheet for us, just so we can kind of get a feel for how things are
Sure,
going.
it's not
and-
just a track where I go.
Oh, yeah, I know
No,
why.
I'm not looking at names.
I went into that and it says I need permission.
Oh, okay, all right, I'll update that.
I was
So-
able to open it. What I appreciate about it is it's just short and succinct. We don't
Yeah,
have to provide
yeah,
any details.
that's why I
Yeah.
wasn't able
Yeah.
to
Just
open it,
resend it
so,
to us?
because I have some to add. Went to the
Oh, okay.
50th anniversary of our ECFE program.
Oh.
Yes, so that was fun, that was Friday night. I was planning on going, and then by chance I got to babysit my 2-year-old and 8-year-old granddaughter and grandson, so we had fun.
That's awesome.
So that form will be resent to us?
Yep, so
Okay.
I'll make sure that everybody has permission to log in, and just anytime you go to an event, fill it out. It can be after, it doesn't have to be before. Again, that's just us gathering some baseline information as we do goals, so that we're making database decisions, see
Thank
where
you.
we're attending, and then try to increase that every year. We are starting to get some board or building administrators that are inviting us to events too, which is really nice because we weren't getting that before. So just hearing that administrators are hearing that we're interested in going to things and getting that feedback that they're inviting us to those certain things. 'Cause I think Molly sent out the invites for the early childhood, so we appreciate you receiving those too, so, yeah.
Yeah, and if, just for the record, if they have them, it's probably preferable to send them to Kim Elson, because then
Yes.
she sends them to us, and she can actually log them and track them and send us an official invite, so we have it on our calendars.
Right, or if you have events in your building and you need volunteers to run things too,
Yeah, but-
like, we would be happy to
Yeah,
do things like that as well.
But funneling it through
Funnel
Kim
it through
is the
Kim,
best
yes.
avenue.
Yes, send it to Kim.
Yep.
All right, so for our next item, we've completed all the items on the agenda, but we do have a special session scheduled at 7:30. So the board will adjourn for now, and then we'll come back into special session at 7:30. Thank you.
Wait till 7:30 to do it.